Good afternoon, and welcome to Sell My Listing, Please. The class was advertised as MLS Marketing, but I like this title much, much better. Because as we talked about in this morning's class, what a huge percent of the agents do with their listings is they just put them in the MLS, do what they have to do while they're in there, and kind of hope something happens. And you should put your listings in the MLS. And matter of fact, one of the things that we talked about in the class this morning was just how important that actually is. Because 80 to 85% of all of your transactions happen because they are cooperative, meaning one person listed it and another person sold it. And that is accomplished for you by the MLS. We talk a great deal about all the wonderful things we do for our customers, and we do. But the 80 to 85% of our success really relies on two things when we're a listing agent, and that is putting it in the MLS and pricing it properly. In fact, real estate as an industry, residential real estate, is almost entirely dependent upon cooperation for compensation. And that's why we have an MLS. If you had to make a living off of just listings and selling them yourself, you would have a much harder time making in this business. And I remember those days going back to my mom, who was a broker when I was a child. And in those days, you really did mostly sell your own listings. And she still did very, very well. But MLS has become possibly the most powerful marketing tool in any industry anywhere, and we are that dependent upon it. The Realtor organization does not define it as a marketing tool. They define it as a way of guaranteeing and ensuring cooperation and compensation. But let's face it, if 85% of the transactions happen that way, MLS is a marketing tool. And few things are more important than how well you use the MLS, how well you put your listings into the MLS, and how well you manage your listings once they were in the MLS. And this morning we talked about all things that you can do with a listing whenever a change happens to your listing. You know, price change, open house, back on the market, all sorts of things. And how every one of these are an opportunity to generate additional business. Today, we're going to take a look at your listing while it's in the MLS and the kinds of things that you can do to ensure that it gets the attention it deserves. So, first of all, one of the things that I want you to realize is this. To be successful, a listing has to do one of these three things. Technically, the first two are kind of the same, but if you get a listing and it does any one or more of these three things, you have a good listing. You want it to sell, and to sell well. There are times when listings sell and it's a kind of a nightmare to get through all the issues. But if your listing sells and it sells well and everything goes nice and smooth, that is a good listing. If that doesn't happen, it can still generate a contract. Because as we learned this morning, listings generate new business. So if your listing generates a buyer, either somebody else sells it or you get the customer for it and you get a contract, that's a good listing. And then the last one is if it doesn't sell, but it generates another listing, that is a successful listing. And listings tend to do that if you manage them properly and draw the right kind of attention to them. So the only bad listing is a listing that accomplishes nothing. And we want to learn today some things we can do to make sure that that does not happen. And so we're going to talk about things like how important the information in your listing actually is and how important it is to have it be correct. We're going to talk about the importance of having every single piece of information in your listing. You're going to hear me say more than once, every missing piece of information is a missed opportunity. We're going to talk about delaying your listing in the MLS. Now, I'm all for staging, but you want to look at it from both perspectives, considering the power and the influence of the MLS. We're going to take a look at your pictures. We're going to talk about something we talked a little bit about this morning, and that is tracking your listing, seeing how the market and the people out there and the other agents are responding to it and using that as a gauge of its health. We're going to learn how to take its temperature then. We know a lot about that nowadays. Everybody's getting their temperature taken under this quarantine. And so we're going to take a look at how to take your market's temperature and tracking its competition, tracking potential buyers, and then some things that you can do to help keep your listing interesting and make it more interesting and keep it from getting stale. And some of these things not only affect how your listing is in the MLS, but they affect how your listing is and performs out on the internet as well. And so all these things are important if you're going to do more with your listing than just stick it in the MLS. The importance of good data. It's important for you to realize a couple things. I've been told, and I agree, that the most important time, especially in this market when things are selling within days, important time for a listing is the first 3 days to a week of when it hits the market and gets into the MLS. And I want to ask this question. Why do we put our listings in the MLS? And Gary, if you answered that question for me the way everyone else does, we put them in the MLS so that they'll sell.
Right.
I guess that's kind of true,
Yeah.
but that's more what the result is that we want. The reason we put our listings into the MLS is so that they can show up on as many searches as they possibly can that other people run, not only in the MLS, but across the internet. So inaccurate or incorrect information can really damage a listing's potential to show up on the internet correctly. And I'll give you one example. Gary and Liz, have either of you put a listing into the MLS yourself at this point?
I have not. No.
You have not. Well, when you do, what you will notice is there are 4 pieces of the address. There is the address street number, street direction, street name, and street suffix. 4 separate fields, the suffix being the drive, road, court, street, laneway, all that stuff. So, Gary and Liz, how important would you say it is for people to find your listing using the address?
Very important.
I would agree. So if you don't put all of the pieces not only correctly into the MLS, but into the correct box, you can limit the ability to find your listing by the address across the entire internet. The mistake a lot of people will make is it's East Maple Drive, and they'll put East Maple Drive all in the street name box instead of putting the east in the direction and the drive in the extension box. What that does is if you do a search in MLS or a search ad on the internet and you search for East Maple Drive, you will not find that listing because you've got things in that field that don't belong there and the searches don't know how to look at it. So that's one example of why it's important not only to have the information in all the right places correctly, but to have the information itself be correct as well. And here's my favorite example. Way back when I came here to Virginia and started working in MLS, I found a listing in the system that had been listed in Hopewell. And it was a nice little listing. Back then, it was a good price. It was $130,000 or so. Been remodeled, cute little white ranch, nicely painted, and it said finished square feet 100. Now I got suspicious. I looked at that. I figured they either left out a 0 or a 1, and sure enough, they did. They left out a 0. And I called the agent and told them, and we fixed it, and they thanked me, and they were fine after that. Except I didn't spot the issue until like it had been in the MLS for 4 or 5 days. You just come across it accidentally. So you guys show homes, right? Is square footage important when people ask you to look for homes for them?
Yeah.
It's very important, especially here in Virginia. They seem to rely on it a great deal. So if somebody had searched for a house like that in Hopewell and used square footage as one of the search fields, would they have found that listing?
No.
Likely not.
No. So think about this for a minute. She made her listing unfindable on any searches in the MLS that used square footage, which most of them do.
Mhm.
And she made her listing unfindable for the first 3 or 4 or 5 days of the life of that listing, which we've already said are the most important days. And all she did is leave out 1 digit. Simple little mistake that anybody could make with huge possible consequences. Because not only wouldn't it have been found in the MLS, but across the internet on all the sites out there, if somebody had used square footage, they would not have found that property. And so that's how important it is when you put your listings in to be extremely, extremely careful, to make sure everything is spelled correct, to make sure everything is selected off the lists that pertain to the property. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. To make sure every individual piece of information goes into its correct little box. It may seem like a small thing to put it in the box next to it, but the way the searches work, they assume everything is done properly and correctly and in its right place. So every mistake can affect the findability of your listing. And remember that our goal is to show up on as many searches as possible. So does that make some sense to you?
It does.
Yeah, and you've run into that. You've searched for properties and not been able to find them. I get calls all the time from our agents, and I go in and search in a slightly different way, and I find it. And I can tell them why they weren't able to find it, because the agent made a mistake putting it into the MLS correctly. And the fact is, if the first 3 days to 7 days of the life of a listing are the most important, and you hamstring it, you don't get that opportunity back again. Not like you would have had it. So that's the first thing I wanted to tell you about. Do it right, do it correctly, take the time to proofread it. When you put a listing in, here's what I want you to do. I want you to not only look at the form and make sure it's correct. Once you've made it active, I want you to print it out on a real piece of paper and then just take a minute, disconnect the phone, and read it through field by field and word for word, and make sure that you didn't do something that could affect the ability of your listing to show up on other searches. Sound like a good idea?
Yes.
Yeah, this stuff's not all rocket science and technology, is it? No, it's important. There's more along some of the same lines. You want to put in every piece of information about your listing that is true and correct. Every missing piece of information is a missed opportunity. You guys have been in the MLS. You've seen listings where the agent got busy or just didn't care, and they put in just as much information as they had to get it into the MLS and be done with the task and move on to something else. And if you've come across those listings, you hate it because you don't have enough information to work with that property, or it doesn't show up on some people's searches. You may think a piece of information is not significant, but you don't know what a customer of someone else is going to ask for, and you don't know what level of ability other agents have to run searches and use the MLS. Some agents are very, very good at it. I'll admit I'm very, very good at it. If I know the property is in there and I have trouble finding it normally, I can find a way to find it. But we have people joining the MLS, they're just getting started, or they don't like technology too much. You've seen some of those folks, and they do searches, but their skills are not as good as some other people's. So every piece of information correct and in its right place, and every piece of information that you can add, because one missing piece of information could cause it to not show up on the one search that had the perfect buyer for that property. And let me give you one example of that. I'm going to see if I couldn't do this morning because my computer got mad at me, but here we go. Can you all see the MLS there?
Yes.
Yes.
All righty, I'm going to go to search, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples. We'll go to single family condo full search. I'll do single family, and just to have something in here, I'm going to do area 44. So, of course, you want all of these fields to have information. These are the ones everybody uses. But let me go down here to the bottom and see if I don't have it here. So you're about to learn. Here's how you add additional fields to your searches. I'm going to click here and I'm going to add a field called interior. You've seen the interior field. It has all of the stuff that's inside the house, and we'll add that. And I'm going to move it up a little bit because it's one I probably would use a lot anyway. And we'll go back, and now it's down here. And here's the field, and these are all the things on it. And when you put a listing in the MLS, you can pick up to like 12 or 15 things off of this list. And what most people do is they just pick as many of the things as are true about the house. But I discovered something when I moved here to Virginia. In all my years in real estate in New Jersey, I never once had a customer ask me for a first floor master bedroom. Ever. I never even thought of that as something you could search for. Then I moved to Virginia. And I found out everybody in Virginia asks for a first floor bedroom. I think it's because they don't like to be any higher off the surface of the planet than 2 feet when they're sleeping. I don't know. But the interesting thing is it gets used all the time. Now, there's more than one way to search for first floor master bedroom. There's a little checkbox in the search. That's up in the top there. But you can search interior. But let me ask you a question, Gary.
Yes.
If you had a listing with a first floor master bedroom, and I was looking for a property for somebody who wanted a first floor master bedroom, would you want me to find your listing?
Yes, absolutely.
I thought so. See, I knew I wasn't asking you a hard question. I knew you could handle that one. You have 3 choices here. Do you know what the difference between these 3 choices are? You have first floor bedroom with full bath, first floor bedroom, and first floor master bedroom. Why? What are the differences?
Size.
Nope.
Going
Good guess, though. I'll tell you what. I'll tell you the differences. First of all, the dictionary defines a master bedroom as the main bedroom. So I guess it's where the parents get to sleep, because they get to sleep in the main bedroom. First floor bedroom with a full bath and first floor master bedroom also have something in common. I'm told by agents, brokers, and appraisers that a first floor master bedroom also has a bath. So even though it's not part of the dictionary definition, it's part of the local definition for most real estate professionals in this area. So what's the difference between a first floor master bedroom around here and a first floor bedroom with a full bath? First floor bedroom with a full bath has a bath that also has a door out into the hallway. Whereas the first floor master bedroom, you can only get to the bath by going through the bedroom. So it's kind of private. Picky if you ask me, but that's what I'm told people around here in Central Virginia define it as. And I've talked to hundreds of people about it. And then you have a first floor bedroom. Let me ask you a question. You have a listing that has a first floor master bedroom, fits all the definition. I have a customer that just wants a bedroom on the first floor. Grandma doesn't want to climb the stairs at night, and so they want to get her own bedroom on the first floor. If I search first floor bedroom, do you want me to find your listing? Say yes.
Yes.
Of course you do. So in my opinion, if you have a listing with a first floor master bedroom, is that also a bedroom with a full bath by our definition? It is.
Yes.
Is it also a bedroom on the first floor?
Yes.
It is. When I fill this in, I'm selecting all three of them so that no matter what kind of bedroom somebody looks for, if it has to be on the first floor, they find my listing. You see what I'm saying? So now I'm thinking in terms of how do I put the listing into the MLS and tell the truth about it and have it show up on more searches. And that's the kind of thinking that I'm talking about. If I scroll down here, actually, yeah, cable TV is on here. Having a little trouble showing it. There it is. And what, 95% of the houses throughout our region probably have some form of cable TV. And nobody ever searches by cable TV, right? So if I run out of choices on here, I'm selecting these and I'm not bothering to click on cable TV because it's almost assumed nowadays. Does that sort of thing make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, then let me give you one more. Down here, I can search for remarks. Now, one of the most common things that people often search for in remarks is in-law suite. It doesn't appear on any of the lists, but it commonly appears in the remarks. So Gary,
Yes.
if you wanted people to find your listing that has a good in-law suite, would you make sure to mention it in the remarks?
Absolutely.
You should. And anything else that is unique about that house, that's what the remarks are for, that might not be easily searched for. You want to put it in the remarks. But I also want to take a minute and show you how to search for it, because this will give you a handle on what I'm talking about when making sure it shows up on various searches. Because if I go down here, right now we have 120 matches. And let's make it a little bigger just to make sure we find something. I'm going to get rid of, I'm going to actually do all of Hanover. So we'll add area, come on, cooperate with me. There we go. We'll add area 36. And we got both of them now. And now we got plenty of properties, 304 active listings. So, Liz, are you still there?
I am. I had to answer the door if you heard my dog barking.
Oh, that's all right. I couldn't hear or see anyway. So,
Okay.
Liz, let's see if you should buy a lottery ticket today, shall we? Up here we have 304 matches. And in this box here, I'm going to type the word in-law. We're looking for an in-law suite.
Mm-hmm.
How many do you think we'll get up there in that count if I do that?
Well, it's also going to partially depend on how they spell in-law, right? If they
Yeah, it
hyphenate
could, but just pick a number because it is a trick question. You're not going to get it right.
Okay, 5.
5. Actually, it's 0. The reason it's 0 is because when I typed it in here like this, it didn't find any listings anywhere in the whole MLS that only have the word in-law for the entire remarks. Now, if I go back here and put an asterisk in front of it, an asterisk means that it can now appear anywhere in the remarks.
Yeah.
And let's see if we got any. We got one.
So you
But
have to put on the
Liz,
front and the back.
yeah, because it's a wild card on both sides.
Right.
But
Okay.
let's take this one step further, shall we? Because you mentioned the other issue with this. If I type a comma here and another asterisk, I can type in, whoops, I'm sorry, in space law. Because could somebody spell it that way?
Yeah.
Yes.
Or
And did I
hyphen.
get any more? Just out of, nope, didn't get any more. And the other way they can do it that I've seen, I'll do comma, asterisk, in dash law. I've seen that, asterisk. By separating them with commas and putting asterisks before and after each word, then it'll search for all 3 spellings. Look what we got. Now we got
Wow.
8 of them.
Yeah.
So there's a free little search tip. But let me ask you a question. Now that you know 7 of those are spelled in-law with a dash, next time you put in-law in the remarks, how are you going to spell it?
With a dash.
Yeah. See, so knowing how people create searches is going to help you put your listing into the MLS in ways that make it more likely for people who know how to do searches to find it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I'm talking about today. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. And there are other examples I could give you, but that's enough to demonstrate what we're talking about. And just remember that every missing piece of information is a missed opportunity because that one piece of information might have made it show up on somebody's search. And how many searches does it actually have to show up on to sell? Really just one if it's the right person.
Right one.
So you want to be correct, accurate, put everything in the right place, and you want every single piece of information that goes in your listing. So what else do we have here? Let's talk about delay. Staging is very important in our day and age, and I am not opposed to staging. I actually used to be more opposed to it than I am now because I know it's part of the business, and if people are staging homes, then you almost have to do some of them at least in order to stay competitive, and I understand that. But I don't necessarily like the idea of delaying a listing until the staging is completed. And I'll give you a couple of reasons for that. Now, this is all old school stuff. You don't have to agree with it. And if somebody's watching this video and you found staging really enhances your business and gets a better price for your customers on a regular basis, then do it. But here's some of my thoughts about that from the other direction. If you list the property today, Gary, and you got it into the MLS, no staging, you didn't even really get it cleaned up yet. I mean, it's okay, but they still stuff in there. But you got it into the MLS, and somebody saw it and showed it, wanted to make an offer on it, and your seller liked the offer, would you allow your seller to take the offer?
Absolutely.
Of course you would. And so the bottom line is, since 80% or more of all transactions happen through the MLS, be careful about delaying the entry of your listing in the MLS. Because the fact of the matter, whether it's a fantastic market like it is now, where houses are selling within days, or it's a market like we had 10 years ago where it took months for a house to sell, somebody is going to buy a house and sell a house today somewhere in our market every day. And if yours is not in the MLS, then there is at least an 80 to 85% chance that that listing that sells is not going to be yours. Am I right?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm saying think about it very clearly, especially if you list a property that is very mainstream, very typical, very widely desired. You might want to think about staging, doing a great job cleaning it up, but just getting it in the MLS. Think about this too. If it sells before the staging is done, that saves a few bucks too, does it not?
Yeah.
So just some thoughts. I'm not saying don't do it or not do it, but I'm saying the best thing that you can do is do everything you can to get it into the MLS as quickly as possible. Fair deal?
Fair deal.
Yep.
All right. Photos. Oh, I could talk about photos all day. I used to do a whole separate class on photos. Did you know that the single most important information in your listing in our day and age is the picture, especially out across the internet? People react to the look of the house before they react to anything else. I've seen people, for example, put their listing into the MLS and just do a picture of the front with their phone and never go back. That's a terrible thing to do. Get good quality pictures. Photographers are almost required in our business nowadays. But I will say that if you use a little common sense, our smartphones do now take excellent pictures. And pictures are a marketing opportunity. What kinds of things then do I recommend for dealing with your pictures? Well, first of all, have a picture ready to go the day it goes into the MLS. Don't have it not have any pictures for the first day or two because the photographer hasn't gone back to you. But can you all do me a big favor? When you take a picture of the front of the house, did you know the house is supposed to be level? Just a thought. I mean, it could be on a hillside, but they never build it to go along with the hillside. You know what I'm saying? So take a moment, take a deep breath, make sure it's level, and take the picture. Take pictures inside the house. You can buy little attachment lenses that give you a little bit of a wide angle, and those are okay, except be careful because a lot of the cheap ones or the ones that do a lot of wide angle will curve the outside of the picture. And so you wind up having walls that look curved. And people will disagree as to where to take the picture. I recommend the picture should be taken in an equal distance from the floor to the ceiling. That's my recommendation. Some people will tell you to get up higher, and that can be a nice angle, but it depends upon the room. I like about halfway between the ceiling and the floor, give as much of a view as possible. And does everybody know the difference between landscape and portrait?
Yes.
Yep.
I'm going to make sure. Here's my phone. Let me see. Where is it in the picture? There it is. All right. Everybody see this? Come on, show up again.
Yes.
Oh, it's not showing. There it is.
There it is.
This is portrait.
Background.
Right.
This is landscape.
Right.
Sideways. There's landscape.
Yeah.
Listen to me very carefully. Always. They say you should never say always about anything. Always take every picture landscape.
Yes.
Always. Even if you're taking a picture of the bathroom through the door, take it in landscape. It's still always going to look better in the MLS and out on the internet. Oh, and by the way, Avoid being in the mirror when you take that picture. Nobody wants to see you in the house. They just want to see the room. So those are a couple of suggestions. Here's a couple more. Suggest that your seller remove as many of their personal items as possible. Suggest that your seller remove their valuable items from view as possible. These things go out on the internet. Don't make your listing be an inventory of the valuable things in the house that somebody might want to come in and acquire illegally. You want to be very careful about those things. You also want there to not be so many things in the rooms that people can't visualize their own things in the house, because that is a selling symptom. When they start visualizing the chair and the couch and the dresser and the table, that is a very good sign. In fact, if you've got the time, it is not a bad idea to temporarily move some pieces of furniture while you take a picture of the room in order to make it as empty as you can. Open the blinds, turn on the lights, get enough light in the room to make it as light as you can. If you take some pictures of your listing and they are dark, because sometimes you just can't help it, especially with a smartphone, send them to me. I will lighten them up for you and make them look much, much better. And all of this, of course, is if you can't afford to spend the money on a professional photographer for that particular listing. One last thing I'm going to mention, I always mention this when I talk about pictures. Please be careful about who you reveal in your pictures lives in the house. For example, a picture of a child's bedroom with a big sign on the wall that says Melissa's room. Please don't take that picture and put it in the MLS. Don't tell the whole internet, which is a dangerous place, that a little girl named Melissa lives in this room and in this house. That's just common sense security. And you have 3 days to get your first picture into the MLS from when you have added it to the MLS. How many days should you take to get your first picture into the MLS? The answer would be 0. If your photographer is going to take a couple of days or got delayed, go snap a few with your phone, clean them up, crop them, make them look good, send them to me if you need help, but you need pictures in your listing from day one. Any questions about that?
Yeah, John.
Yes, sir.
I'm working with a customer right now. I'm probably list this home hopefully in the next 2 or 3 months, but he's got a 2-car garage and he's a car guy. The garage is really set up, really nice. Got a lift. It's but he's also got a lot of expensive tools, tool cabinets. I'm debating whether to take any pictures or how to handle that, because obviously, you know,
you obviously want a picture of the garage that shows the lift, because that's staying.
right.
But if you can find an angle that doesn't show all of his expensive stuff that's not staying, that's your best angle for that picture.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because not only is it an inventory, but when the people move into the house, unless they've got just as good stuff, it ain't going to look like that.
Exactly.
So, take it from an angle that doesn't show too much of the really wonderful, expensive stuff. They'll see what it looks like when they see the house.
Right.
But definitely show the lift. In fact, I would, is it a floor lift?
It is.
Yeah, I would take a picture of it with all the way down and a picture with it halfway up.
Oh, okay.
Just to show that it's there and it works and people get the message for it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
What else about pictures? Here's a big one. It's June. Liz, should there still be snow on the roof?
No.
No. You want to go in periodically and swap some pictures in and out. You want to pick a different angle for the front of the house. One of the odd things is I was taught in New Jersey that you take the front picture at a slight angle, it makes the house look bigger and more dramatic. And yet everybody here in Central Virginia uses the picture that's face front on to the house. I guess it's just kind of a habit that people do here. But have a couple of front shots at least and swap them out once in a while, even if it's during the same season, so that if it shows up on agents' desktops more than once, it doesn't always look exactly the same. And the same thing with out there on the internet. Swipe in a new angle of the kitchen once in a while. And the last thing I'm going to mention about pictures, when you put your listing in the MLS, there's a place to caption the pictures. You can say what they are. You can describe it a little bit. You can say something that helps the customer imagine their stuff in that room. Do that as well. Add your captions. They also show up not only on people's MLS printouts, but they show up in some places even out there on the internet. So that's pictures. Any questions about pictures?
No.
All right, then let's see what comes next. Central Lock, tracking your showings. We talked about this morning, that if it has a lockbox, Central Lock records the showings and it records the agent who was there. You want to do a couple of things with that. This morning we talked about how you can use that information to follow up whenever there's a change in your listing. Every time you get a price reduction or you have an open house or something along those lines, you want to immediately notify the people who have shown the property previously, because the change might make a difference if they're still working with that customer. But for the sake of putting your listing in the MLS, you want to do two things with the lockbox. First of all, for every showing, you want to get feedback. Now, the system has a built-in feedback thing that everybody tends to ignore, so don't rely on it. But give the agent a call. And what you're looking for is bad news. I mean, it's great when you get good news, but if it was really good news, then why didn't they buy the house? You know what I'm saying? But you've been trying to tell your seller since they started the listing process about this or that or the other thing or the price. They don't listen to you anymore. So from now on, you want any bad news to come from other people rather than yourself. And if you get a good enough collection of bad news, then it can help you work with your seller to do the things that need to be done to make the listing a little bit more marketable. So get feedback, even if you have to call or email and ask for it, on every showing, on every listing. And in addition to that, and I think that's the next one here. Yeah, no, we're going to stay on that slide for a minute. I thought I had another slide, but we did talk about this morning. I'm going to ask you the question again, Gary. Let's see how you answer it. If you put a lockbox on your listing and 2 weeks go by and there are no showings recorded, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
A good thing.
That's a good thing. That's right. Because you're going to print that blank sheet of paper out, and you're going to go to your seller and you're going to say, Mrs. Jones, this is how many people wanted to see your listing at this price. It's been in the MLS. They will show it if it matches what anybody wants and it's in their price range. It just happens. So why do you suppose we haven't had any showings? You might even bring some from your other listings to show that they had showings, you didn't. So even no showings on the tracking can be a valuable thing if you use it properly. But now we're going to take your listing's temperature. The rule of thumb is, in the marketplace, this is an NAR principle from before Richmond was colonized. every properly priced listing sells 100% of the time, regardless of the market. Do you believe that?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the truth. Because you could say, well, this was wrong with it, or this was wrong with it, or this was wrong with it. Well, that should have been taken into account in the pricing of the property. But there's another thing that's important about the price that you can track with putting your listing into the MLS, and that's this idea of taking its temperature, because the problem is always the price. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to set it up with some very round numbers that are never quite this easy. But Liz,
Yep.
you have a listing, and there are 9 other listings out there that are virtually identical to your listing from a marketing standpoint. There's nothing really significantly different about them. You've seen that in a subdivision.
Yep.
Maybe some of the colors and a few of the features, but nothing that makes a huge price difference. So there are 10 listings out there, and properties are selling, and this wouldn't be true today. I'm going to go back a little bit. Let's say 50% of the properties actually sell out there. That's knowing the relationship between the number of listings and the number of solds. You can get that in our MLS. So if there are 10 listings out there that are virtually identical, yours is one, and 50% of the listings are going to sell according to statistics in a marketplace. Liz, where on that list of properties do you want your listing to appear?
From a price standpoint, or?
Yeah, price
Yeah.
standpoint.
Low. You want it to be one of the lower ones.
Yeah, you want to be in the bottom half of that listing.
Mm-hmm.
So using MLS information, you can go to your seller and say, Mrs. Jones, right now, only 50% of the properties are selling no matter what anybody does. And so your listing is in the top 2%. Do you really want to sell your house, and where do we need to be on this list in order to make that happen? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So taking your listing's temperature, looking at the showings, looking at the feedback, looking at where it appears in relationship to the rest of the market out there. These are all things that you can do in the MLS and adjust them in the MLS to make your listing more marketable through the agents that are looking for homes and finding homes and showing them. And none of it is bad information, because you see my second point there? You do not control who shows the listing. So if nobody's showing it, nobody wants to show it. And you and the seller are the only ones who can change that by figuring out what needs to be changed so that it shows up on more and more people's searches and starts getting showings. And so that's what I mean by taking your listings market temperature. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yep.
Let's see what the next slide shows. Tracking competition. Always be looking for regular fresh comps. And Gary already knows how to do this, because I told him this morning. Remember when you listed this property, you ran a search for comparable actives and solds, did you not? Yes. Save that search. Turn it into an auto email to yourself and maybe even to your seller. And so you watch for new properties that have sold since you listed it that could affect the appraisal or could affect the sale price. You look for new listings that have come on the market, and now suddenly your listing is no longer in the bottom half of that list. It's now at the top of the list. And you know that according to updating the inventory and the month's supply and the absorption, which is what we're talking about, you know that that listing's not going to sell until a few others sell first. And does your seller want to wait? Know what month's supply is, because that will tell you how long it should take for your listing normally to sell. That's in addition to knowing days on market. And the thing I mentioned earlier about 10 listings, it's nice if it was always 10 because you can do the numbers in your head, but know what the percent of inventory that has sold for the past 12 months, 6 months, and 3 months is, and make sure your listing places in the inventory in the best possible place based on those percentages. Does that all make sense?
Yes.
And you can get that information in a couple of ways. There are statistics programs in the MLS, or you can just call me and ask me to run some numbers for you, and I can do that because I know where all those statistics places are in the MLS, but it's not hard to do. Any questions about that? Any questions to see how your listing compares against its competition, actives and coming soons?
Nope.
All right, we are nearly done. There's not a whole lot left here. How about tracking potential buyers? Don't you wish there was a way that you could go in the MLS and find other people's buyers and make sure that the agent knows that they should tell their customer about your listing? And there is. It's called reverse prospecting. And we talked about that this morning in a lot more detail than we're going to talk about it today. But let me get a listing up on the screen here for you and show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to, I don't have any listings, so I'm going to become Mike Schnault again, like I did this morning. And he had a good listing that I could use to illustrate this. So I'm going to pull this over onto the screen. You can see that, right, Gary?
Yes.
And we'll go to active listings, and I'll click on his hopeful church listing, tag it. If you have listings, once you check it, you go down here to reverse prospecting. And this is all the people in the MLS who have a search that's active, an auto email search that's active and running, where it matches his listing. Boy, that's a nice long list, isn't it? You won't always get this many. But I want to tell you a few things that are worth doing here. First of all, these ones with hearts, their customer marked it as a favorite. This agent gets a call on day one. These 3 agents' customers marked it as a possibility. It has possibilities. They also get calls from you, not emails, but your question is different. With these, the question is, they marked it as a favorite. How soon are you going to show it? Because if it's a favorite, why wouldn't they show it? This one has possibilities. What can we do to this property that's not too expensive to make it more interesting to your customer? And talk about how to make those changes, talk about what the customer is looking for. The rest of these, you email. And I showed in this morning's class how you can do these as a group. And what you want to do is save this list as of today. Let's say this is the day Mike put this listing in here. You want to save this list and have it handy, because this basically is your deadwood list. You call the ones on top, you email the ones below that, you check off any on the list, and you can copy and paste this into an Excel spreadsheet to do that. And check off the ones where you've had any positive response. The rest are all deadwood. From then on, once a week, you go in here and you look for any new ones. Those are the ones that are golden. You check this list once a week. Up, we went past it. I'm going to go back up to the slide. You look for new prospects every week. You call existing prospects if anything changes, price change, open house, status changes, and you follow up on the new ones almost as soon as they hit reverse prospecting. And if you've already marked everyone else on that long list that Mike had there as the deadwood, you've already contacted them at least once, then you just have to watch for the new ones. And you can sort that list by date so that your new ones will be at the top. It'll make it even easier. So that's how you use reverse prospecting faithfully as a follow-up tool to contact agents about their buyers, tracking potential buyers. Any questions about that?
Can you go back to that screen, John, just real quick that showed the
Yeah.
and this is related but sort of off topic, and so sorry, I don't think it'll go too far, but that email count, is that how many times that house was sent to that prospect? Or was
No, that's how many times, now I can't remember it. Let's see if it gives us an explanation. No, I have forgotten the explanation for that. I apologize. I think it's, no, I'm not going to even guess, because if I guess and I'm wrong, it doesn't help you. Here's where you can sort it by date. So these are the most recent ones.
Yeah.
I like to keep it sorted by the icons, which it will be when you go back in there again. So yeah, I don't remember what that does. If you pop me an email, I'll find out for you and send it back to you.
Okay.
All righty. Good question. I just don't remember it. It's been too long since.
Yeah, well, I was like, well, gosh, somebody's gotten that 808 times, even though they marked it as a favorite. I go, I'm not following up with them. If they've gotten that many darn emails, they're not that serious.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it means, and I have a vague idea, but if I'm wrong and people watch the video, then they're going to get confused. So
fair. Thank you.
All righty, so let's move on here. This slide wanted to come up before anyway. Keeping your listing fresh and interesting. And we talked a little bit about this, but this is every bit as important as putting it into the MLS. I always thought that a good price reduction is worth as much or more than a whole brand new listing, because it may have finally made the listing marketable. So refresh photos, swap photos in once in a while. It only takes a couple of minutes, and it not only changes them in the MLS, it changes them out on the internet websites as well. Of course, always update the price. Update the remarks. Gosh. Remember I taught you how to search remarks and how to put words in there? Well, in your feedback, if certain words keep coming up that people use in describing the house and they're good words, think about adding those words into the remarks so that people who know how to search remarks, which I do all the time, will have more of a chance of finding the house. It brings them a little bit more out front. But don't just make your listing fire and forget. Listings are not fire and forget until they're closed. Up until then, you want to make changes that make them look a little fresher as time goes on. And I mentioned the internet. I have a flyer for this. If you don't have it, pop me an email. I'll send it back to you, because never forget that you're not just putting it in the MLS. It is going out to hundreds of websites across the internet, maybe more. It goes out to our website. It goes out to Realtor.com, Zillow, Trulia, Homes.Richmond.com. It goes out to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of broker sites all across the internet. And through ListHub, it goes out to hundreds of websites across the internet. And remember, it's the first week that gets the most response across all of those venues. So make sure it's perfect in the MLS on day one. It's all about showing up on as many searches as possible, not just in the MLS, but on the internet as well. Also, as often as possible. as freshly as possible. And it involves reminding agents that it's out there because they need that reminding. I have had too many properties where I sent out those emails and they said, wow, I didn't think of that house for this person. And it got a showing that weekend. There are no guarantees, but the MLS is by at least 80% the most likely roadway, pathway to lead to a sale for your listing. And so you want to maximize that tool as much as you possibly can by putting it in properly and managing it properly while it's in there. Any last quick questions?
Yep, fantastic.
All right, then let me just go up here and turn off the video. Those of you who are watching by video, bye.